Well, thank you everybody for joining us again, and for anybody who might be watching this on YouTube, welcome as well. Thanks for joining us. I want to pick up on some bits and pieces that we looked at on Sunday in the service when we had a little look at Matthew's Gospel. So I'm just going to share a couple of thoughts, and as usual, I'm going to pop up some slides. So here they come. And let's see if I can get that onto slideshow for you. There it is. I want to talk to you a little bit about this whole business of familiar and unfamiliar, stepping out of the safety, the familiarity of the boat onto the water and walking with Jesus. So I'm just going to read the verses that we looked at together on Sunday again. Matthew 14, just to remind us of where we were. So Matthew 14, from verse 22. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. And shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it's I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand, caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Jesus, there's so much about him that we could talk about, and even within his ministry, there's, for the people of the time that he was living amongst in first century Israel, there was much that was familiar about Jesus and his ministry, and there was much that was unfamiliar. He behaved differently. He taught differently. He modeled new ways of spirituality. And yet he was clearly, and his ministry was clearly, blessed by God. There were the miracles, made a massive positive impression. But on the other hand, he ate with and he shared his life with people that the community regarded as sinners. What was that about? He taught using parables, a new way that caught people's attentions. And he challenged the ways of some of the religious leaders, which they didn't appreciate at all. And all the way through his ministry time, there's a tension between the pull of the old ways versus the blessing of the new. And when we read through the Gospels, we can feel sometimes the tension for the people around at the time between sticking with the comfort zone or even with the fear of breaking away from the old ways versus traveling with God, traveling with Jesus, because what he said and what he did seemed so right, so winsome. And there's a tension there for the people of the time. And for all of us, I think we have our ingrained ways, our rhythms, the way we've always done stuff, versus sometimes when we think objectively about how things might be done differently, we recognize that, yeah, that's possible, could even be better. but the pull of how we've always done stuff can be very strong. Our behaviours are often governed by things like instinct rather than just intention. On Sunday, I mentioned the story of a former colleague of mine, who was the black belt in karate, and how he was at home one day, and his wife. I don't think she intentionally sneaked up behind him, but she was behind him. She put a hand on his shoulder, and his instincts just kicked in, and over she went on the floor in front of him in a karate move. And the story of the missionaries on furlough, so used to boiling water that to just get water from the tap and drink it, for them, they couldn't cope with that. They just couldn't. It went against everything that was in them. I've probably not confessed to you, but I'm not keen on snakes. I'm just not. Where that phobia or whatever it is began, I'm not sure. The textbooks would tell you that you pick it up from your parents and that sort of stuff. I've handled them. I've made a point of having a go. But when Julie will tell you, when she and I were first married in our very early years, I must have been having a dream one night about something or other. But right next to where I slept on the bedside cabinet, there was a reading lamp there that was kind of in that position, looking down on me, right next to me. And one night, I was having the most vivid dream ever. And there was the longest snake ever crawling up the stairs, and one end was at the bottom of the stairs, the other end was at the top, coming round the bedroom door, and it was looking over the bed at me in exactly the position of where this snake was. And I literally leapt up. I was standing on the bed, and I was making a run for the bedroom window, which was at the foot of the bed at the other end of the room. And I would have been gone had it not for the fact that Julie had reached out and grabbed the back of my pajamas and pulled me back down, actually, and probably saved me from all sorts of things that night. If you offered me a penguin chocolate bar, in my head, logically, that tells me that's a very nice thing to do. I like chocolate bars and all the rest of it. But because my mum only ever fed me penguin chocolate bars for that many years, she wouldn't buy Club, she wouldn't buy Wagon Wheels, she wouldn't buy Kit Kats or anything like that. She only ever bought penguin chocolate bars. And given the choice, I'll never eat one again. I really won't, because it's made that kind of impression on me. For those of you who are married, I can say from experience that there are very different ways of living your life. And then when suddenly you share your life with somebody, you begin to discover that the way they do things and the way you do things are not always the same. And you have to negotiate and really give in and find new ways of doing stuff. It's interesting. In this situation that Peter finds himself in, the big question to start off with is, Peter's been working around Galilee all his life. He knows water, he knows Galilee, he knows the physics of it all. But why did he get out of the boat? When Jesus said, "Come," why did Peter get out of the boat? What's he thinking? What helps him process that decision to step over the side? The others stay in the boat. Everything that was familiar to Peter in his experience thus far was that walking on water, that's not what happens when you get out and stand on water. So what was it that convinced Peter and made him get out of the boat. And what I'd like us to do is just break up into some small groups of 4 or 5 or 6 of us in the groups, whatever, and just have a quick chat for 5 minutes or so as to why you think Peter made that decision to get out of the boat. And then we'll come back together and share our thoughts on that one and just kick that about. So is that okay as something to do for the next 5 minutes? So are we able to pop into small groups, Laura? Is that okay? Get my slides back up. Here we go. Hopefully those of you who are watching on YouTube have got your thoughts there about why did Peter get out of the boat. Moving on beyond that feedback and sharing. Just waiting for my slides to catch up with me now. If they're going to. Yes. So the next question then is, following on from that one of why did Peter get out of the boat? Had a look at that, and he walked however many steps he walked, and then he starts to sink. So the second half of this little episode is, well, why did Peter begin to sink? Verse 30 says, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid, beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And there's something going on here about the influence of what we see, what our focus is on, and maybe something to do with fear here as well. And so for part 2, I'd like us to get into groups again for another 5 minutes or so and just have a little bit of a think about why did Peter begin to sink. So I'll pull the slide down and right, and recording's back on. Thank you, folks. That was a great chat there about why did Peter begin to sink. What I want us to have a little think about is this. So let me try and share my screen with you. Here it comes. So I talked on Sunday about a Kairos moment, a special moment, a God moment, if you like. And Kairos, Greek word, means special time, divine, God moments. It kind of suggests the right or the critical or the opportune moment in time. Now, the ancient Greeks had 2 words for time. They had chronos, and you're familiar with that one, as in chronological, as in the sequential order of time. And kairos kind of signifies something proper or opportune, a time for action. And during this very unusual lockdown time, and on these Wednesday evenings when we've been using some of this time to try and draw close to God and to seek his face and start to hear from him. What's he saying to us in this time, his people? What's he saying to his church, specifically to Chesterfield Baptist Church? What are we feeling and thinking as we've got a bit of time to think about where we've had our priorities in the past and where we might put them in the future? What is God laying on our hearts? And we've just covered a huge amount of stuff there. These ideas of, is the church safe in the boat, or is it out there with Jesus as Jesus is out there in our world and our community? And that's a big challenge in that. Let me see if I can get the slide to move on. It all seems to be slowing down. There we go. So I'd like us to spend a bit of time now praying in our groups. And folks, let's be honest about this, because whatever we are thinking deep down inside, Jesus knows that. So we might as well kind of incorporate it in our prayers and be honest about things like our comfort zones and the way we do things, because to change some of our preferences is never easy. Giving up stuff that we're really comfortable with, we really like, to make space for some other stuff as we adventure and try new things, that's not easy. Let's not pretend it is. Let's be honest with God about that. Stepping out is a challenge. Peter got back into the boat for a reason, and we are no different to him. We like our safe spaces, but there again, as a people of faith, we want to try and follow. And is there something going on? Ken suggested that this is nothing new this evening. We've been in this place before. So is this lockdown thinking, processing time for us, is it a Kairos moment? Is it an opportune time for us to think, pause, pray, and maybe come out of it and do some things different? I think we need to pray for things like wisdom, discernment, and for courage. They're the sorts of things that are on my mind at the moment for us to pray about. You may well have other stuff as well that you want to share. So I'm going to suggest now that we get into groups to pray.